guys, welcome to the final lecture on the ANS. We're going to start out by talking about the distribution of the parasympathetic response. So in other words, is it going to be something that is going to spread to many organs at once, or is it restricted to like one particular spot? And for the most part, the parasympathetic response is very localized. So it's not like a lot of different parts of your body get turned on at the same time. Rather, just your salivary glands, or just your eyeball, or just your heart. Because there is a one-to-one relationship between pre and post-ganglionic neurons. Now, I want you to compare this with the sympathetic response. The sympathetic preganglionic neuron, and we never saw this in other pictures, actually has a ton of big branches. That means there is going to be, for every one preganglionic neuron, there are more postganglionic neurons. So this gives us a more widespread distribution, a greater extent, greater organ involvement in terms of the sympathetic response compared to the parasympathetic. Now, there's another thing that makes the sympathetic response much more body-wide, much more systemic, if you will. And that's the fact that in our sympathetic pathway, we are going to release epinephrine and small amounts of norepinephrine into the blood. And then the blood goes everywhere. So there is no equivalent parasympathetic hormone. So overall, the sympathetic distribution is much greater. Two reasons. Number one, epinephrine in the blood. Number two, this relationship of many postganglionics for each preganglionic. All right, what about the duration? Well, remember, acetylcholine is our neurotransmitter released onto our target tissue, onto our smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. And the acetylcholine lasts in that synapse until it's broken down by an enzyme that we see spelled down here, called acetylcholinesterase. And acetylcholinesterase works really, really, really fast. So that means the duration of this response is going to be short because we break down the acetylcholine quickly with acetylcholinesterase. All right, what about the sympathetic response? Well, norepinephrine is our sympathetic neurotransmitter. It is going to remain in the synapse until it is vacuumed back up into the neuron that released it. And that transporter, that integral protein right there that slurps up the norepinephrine, works fairly slowly, which means norepinephrine spends more time in the synapse, which means the duration is going to be longer. All right, well, what about epinephrine? Remember, sympathetic response, we release epinephrine from the adrenal medulla into the blood, and it's going to stay in the blood for a long time until the liver breaks it down. And this will increase the duration of that sympathetic response. Okay, one last thing. And the last thing involves the reproductive system. Because earlier we talked about how the parasympathetic and sympathetic systems were antagonistic. But in terms of the reproductive system, they're not antagonistic. They actually work in concert with one another. So, the parasympathetic system is going to act on primarily the blood vessels within the penis. It's going to cause dilation of penile arterioles. More blood flows into the penis, and the penis gets erect. That's the parasympathetic effect on the penis. There is no antagonistic sympathetic effect. Instead, the sympathetic response causes the various glands and other organs that are storing things, like the epididymis right here, which stores sperm, the bulbourethral gland, the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland. Sympathetic stimulation causes these glands to secrete their components, and it causes smooth muscle within the vas deferens, within these various ducts, and within the urethra to contract, resulting in ejaculation. So in terms of reproductive structures, parasympathetic is responsible for erection, sympathetic is responsible for ejaculation. There is not this like offsetting roles like we saw with other organs. Now, as far as the female reproductive system goes, it's a similar situation. Parasympathetic stimulation causes the engorgement of the clitoris and the vestibular bulbs. These are erectile structures. So they're going to become engorged with blood upon parasympathetic stimulation, while sympathetic stimulation causes the greater vestibular glands to secrete their mucus, which has a lubrication function for the vagina. And on that note, we are done. The autonomic nervous system. Lecture number 5 is finished. See you next time when we talk about muscles. Bye-bye.